Hello, I'm not here today. I'm home with a sick kid, so I'm going to be talking to you about chapter 4. So if everyone could open up their books and flip to. So the first couple of pages of the chapter is just a long list of people that make a scene at showing up to Gatsby's party. Um, and then bottom page 63, then Gatsby shows up in his fantastic car, right? And so this is a book with lots of people with very fancy cars. And as we saw in the previous chapter, excuse me, wealthy people do not drive their cars very well, right? So, in a book about fancy cars, this is the fanciest of the fancy cars. On page 64, it's pretty, isn't it, old sport? He jumped off to give me a better view. Have you ever seen it before? I'd seen it. Everybody had seen it. It was a rich cream color, bright with nickels swollen here and there in its monstrous length, with triumphant hat boxes and supper boxes and toolboxes, and terraced by a labyrinth of windshields that mirrored a dozen suns. Sitting down behind many layers of glass in a sort of green leather conservatory, we stared into town. All right, so this is where the chapter where we finally find out what this book is about, right? So Gatsby picks Nick up in the super fancy car, and then he starts to tell him all of these stories. And you can tell where, we'd heard from Jordan that Jordan didn't necessarily believe everything Gatsby had been telling her. And also, we've also seen how many different rumors there are floating around about Gatsby as to, how he got his money and why he throws out his parties. And some people said he killed someone, and some people said he was related to the Kaiser. Some people said there's been lots of different stories. But now he's going to tell Nick his story. And then page 65, so he's telling this as they're driving very, very fast into New York City. I'll tell you the God's truth. His right hand suddenly ordered divine retribution to stand by. I'm the son of some wealthy people in the Middle West, all dead now. I was brought up in America but educated at Oxford because my ancestors have been educated there for many years. It's a family tradition. He looked at me sideways, and I knew why Jordan believed he was lying. Okay, now, we also have some very carefully chosen words, right? What does it mean to be educated at Oxford? Does it mean you graduated from there? Could. Does it mean you just went there? It could. Does it mean you took one class? It could. We don't really know what that means, because if he straight up graduated from Oxford, he would have said, I'm a graduate of Oxford. But he didn't, right? So, and the way he looked at Nick after, kind of looked at him sideways like this, makes Nick a bit skeptical as to what Gatsby's saying to him. And then he also says, Nick says, what part of the Middle West? I inquired casually. San Francisco. I see. My family all died, and I came into a great deal of money. Now, I don't know how much you know about geography, but San Francisco is in California, and California is not in the Middle West by any stretch. So then he tells him other stories that how he fought in the war and how he went all over the world collecting gems and stuff. And he told all that stuff to Nick so that Nick would think well of him, right? Like Gatsby wanted Nick to think that Gatsby was someone of importance. Because when he invites writes Jordan over for tea, then she's going to tell Nick the whole story and why Gatsby has done everything that Gatsby's done. Go to page 68, please. Then, as they're driving in on page 68, we get some more car stuff. And as they drive by through the Valley of Ashes, so remember we got the East and West Egg out in kind of the Hamptons. That's where the very wealthy people live. And we got New York and Manhattan, where a lot of them work. And then this is kind of the in-between area. And the Valley of Ashes opened up on both sides of us, and I had a glimpse of Mrs. Wilson straining at the gas pump with a panting vitality as when we went by. So that's the life that she's trying to escape from in her affair with Tom, right? So she's working real hard. She's just standing out there sweating as they drive by in their fancy car. But the people drive the fancy cars, and the people who have less money fix them. And we get, if you remember the careless driving thing, we get another example of that here. A cop pulls him over. All right, old sport, said tall Gatsby. We slowed down. Taking a white card from his wallet, he waved it before the man's eyes. Right, jar, agreed Mr. Policeman, tipping his cap. Know you next time, Mr. Gatsby. Excuse me. What was that, I inquired? A picture of Oxford? And Gatsby said, I was able to do the commissioner a favor once. He sends me a Christmas card every year. Now, I am not wealthy, powerful enough to do the police commissioner a favor, and so if I get pulled over, I get a ticket, right? But all Gatsby has to do is hold up this little card. He gets a Christmas card every year from the police commissioner. Now, that also tells us a little something about Gatsby, right? So we still don't know what Gatsby's real situation is, but he's apparently a wealthy, fairly powerful human, right? So then he goes in and they go into the bar, and he introduces Nick to Meyer Wolfsheim. Okay, now on page 70, Meyer Wolfsheim tells us some stories about the old metropole filled with faces dead and gone, filled with friends gone now forever. I can't forget so long as I live the night they shot Rosie Rosenthal there. There was 6 of us at a table, and Rosie had eaten and drunk a lot all evening. When it was almost morning, the waiter came up to us with a funny look and says somebody wants to speak to him outside. All right, says Rosie, and begins to get up. I pull down the chair. Let the bastards come get you if they want to, Rosie, but don't you. So help me, move outside this room. Okay, so these are the people Wolfsheim hangs out with. Okay, so we're going to get just a couple little details of information about Wolfsheim, which is significant, right? Because this is someone that Gatsby works with. Going on a little bit. Go to page 72. So Gatsby leaves briefly, and on page 72, have you known Gatsby a long time? Nick inquired. Several years, Wolfsheim answered in a gratified way. I made the pleasure of his acquaintance just after the war. But I knew I'd discovered a man of fine breeding after I talked with him an hour. I said to myself, that's the kind of man you'd like to take home and introduce to your mother and sister. He paused. I see you looking at my cufflinks. Finest specimens of human molars. Wolfsheim's not a dentist, right? And so we don't know exactly where he got those, cufflinks for molars. So with prom coming up, gentlemen, if you really want to impress / terrify your date, get yourself some molar cufflinks. My guess is, because he's not a dentist, my guess is whoever those molars originally belonged to probably wanted them still in their head, but now they're on Wolfsheim's cufflinks. Okay, so we don't know whether he killed somebody but that's a fairly terrifying thing to do, right? In addition to that, on page 73, Gatsby comes back in and he says, who is he, Wolfsheim, anyhow? An actor? No. A dentist? Meyer Wolfsheim? No, he's a gambler. Gatsby hesitated, then added coolly. He's the man who fixed the World Series back in 1919. Fixed the World Series. The idea staggered me. Okay, so, and this actually happened, right? I think it was a team called the Black Sox, and they were paid off to throw the World Series. And at least in the book, because, Meyer Wolfsheim's not a real person in reality, but he was the one in the book that fixed the World Series by himself, right? So if you have enough money and authority and power to be able to rig what was at the time the biggest sporting event in the country, that's a pretty powerful dude. Okay, now often gives us those little details to tell us stuff about Wolfsheim, because by extension then we learn stuff about Gatsby, right? He's friends and business associates with this really tough, dangerous, and very powerful dude, right? Going on page 74, it gets a little bit confusing here. Okay, so on page 74 it says, one day back in October in 1917, said Jordan Baker that afternoon, sitting up very straight in a straight chair in the tea garden in the Plaza Hotel. So Jordan tells the story of seeing Gatsby and Daisy together on page 75. The officer, who was Gatsby, looked at Daisy while she was speaking in a way that every young girl wants to be looked at sometime, and because it seemed romantic to me, I've remembered the incident ever since. His name was Jay Gatsby, and I didn't lay eyes on him again for over 4 years. Even after I'd met him on Long Island, I didn't realize it was the same man. So they knew each other before the war, and Daisy and Gatsby were together, right? We don't know the whole story yet, but on page 75, bottom of 75, top of 76, so Gatsby went off to war, and Daisy ended up getting married to Tom Buchanan. The day before the wedding, Tom gave her a string of pearls valued at over $350,000. Now, $350,000 back in the early 1900s would be over a $7 million necklace today. That's the type of wealth we're dealing with, that you can just toss that off in a fancy necklace. And then on 77, so they got married. Actually, right before that, the day of the wedding, Jordan came in and Daisy was drunk. And she was screaming, take them downstairs, give them back to whoever they belong to. Tell them Daisy changed her mind. So Daisy's changed her mind. And she's sobbing. Okay? They get her into the bathtub, and she's holding this letter that she doesn't let go until it falls apart. We're going to talk about that letter a little bit later, because we don't really know what it says. But they got her act together, she got married, and then on 77th, that was in August. A week after I left Santa Barbara, Tom ran into a wagon on the Ventura Road one night and ripped the front wheel off his car. The girl who was with him got in the papers too because her arm was broken. She was one of the chambermaids in the Santa Barbara hotel. So not only did Tom cheat shortly after they got married, he also got into a car accident. And if you remember the big car accident at the end of the party in the last chapter, they flipped the car and ripped the wheel off, which is exactly what Tom did. Okay? And he was having an affair with somebody too. Going on a little bit on page 78, it was a strange coincidence, I said. Jordan said, but it wasn't a coincidence at all. Why not? Gatsby bought that house so that Daisy would be just across the bay. Then it had not been merely the stars to which he had aspired on the June night. It came alive to me, delivered suddenly from the womb of his purposeless splendor. He wants to know if you'll invite Daisy to your house some afternoon and then let him come over. That's why he throws all of those parties. This is what Gatsby's all about, right? He's all about trying to get Daisy back. For the last 5 years, he's done nothing but devote himself towards the singular goal of getting Daisy back, including buying that gigantic house right across the bay so that he could watch her. Well, not really watch her, but like if you remember at the end of chapter 1, when Nick came home from the party and saw Gatsby out going, right, reaching out towards the green light, well, he was reaching out towards Daisy. And now, we're going to talk about whether this is romantic or creepy, and I think oftentimes romantic gestures, it's a fine line between being romantic and creepy. Whether this type of dedication and devotion to somebody is romantic, or whether he's creepy, obsessed stalker. And I think it could be a little A and a little B. And, I mean, so when he throws those parties, he spends that amount of money. You know, remember that little clip from the party scene we watched on Thursday? He spends lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of money on these parties, right? He doesn't attend them. He just walks around, sees if Daisy's going to show up, and then if she doesn't, he goes back inside. Okay? So again, it's a fine line between being obsessed with someone and, doing something which is romantic, as a romantic gesture towards them. Okay? So, you're going to read chapter 5 for tomorrow, and I will be back at that point. So if you have any questions, I can answer them then.